Welcome back. We will continue with the session on attitudes. So, if we remember, like in the past two sessions, we tried to define what is attitude, what are the defining factors of attitude. Like attitude is it's a strong belief about certain things. It's a predisposition. It's a learning, predetermined learning to act and feel about certain things, objects, persons in certain ways, and it is a positive and a negative feeling, persistent feeling that you have about certain things and objects and people, and your intention to act in that way. Then we discussed about attitudes effects on behavior and behavior's effects on attitudes. We discussed about like the like a theory of reasoned actions, like why attitude may lead to behavior and what are the processes involved, what are the moderating variables which may come in between in the way of attitude leading to behavior. We discussed about the important role of behavior control while we are discussing like how attitude can predict behavior. We discussed about the importance of cognitive dissonance as like and how this dissonance like if it has to be reduced if attitude has to predict behavior or behavior has to predict attitude. Next, in the next discussion, and we talked about how attitudes can be changed. Next, in the next discussion, we discussed about different types of attitudes present in the workplace. Like we talked about job satisfaction, we discussed about employee satisfaction, factors of job satisfaction, different factors of job dissatisfaction, 4 different ways of expressing the job dissatisfaction. We also talked about your organizational commitment, how to develop organizational commitment, what managers can do to develop organizational commitment. And then we talked about your job involvement, what are the factors of job involvement. We also talked about employee engagement, what are the defining characteristics of employee engagement and how it is a very holistic concept consisting of like affective commitment, job involvement, satisfaction, and the principle of advocacy where you try to give a discretionary behavior, like it's a voluntary act that you take where you voluntarily decide to do something extra for your organization, though it is not required by the stated job requirements. Then we discussed about the importance of emotions in the workplace, different types of emotions that you have. We talked about work moods, we talked about your positive and negative affectivity, like the moods, like how it sometimes stays with you for hours and weeks, and how it may affect the performance. Also we discussed about the importance like the emotion. One of the major areas of concern is of course emotional labor, where you have to suppress maybe your original emotion, and because you are compensated for your emotions, then sometimes you have to show a different emotion which is totally different from the actual emotion that is maybe going through in your mind at that particular point of time. And if every day you have to practice that, it may lead to burnout of the employee. So these are issues that organization should be careful about and take corrective take measures to deal with these factors. We discussed about how organization can nurture a good atmosphere, work atmosphere too, so that it generates positive work moods and effect of work moods on performance and so on. In this chapter, we will continue now with emotional intelligence. What are the different factors of emotional intelligence? What is emotional intelligence? What are the different factors of emotional intelligence? We will focus also on the values that a people have, the personal values, organizational values, work values and societal values, and try to find out how these are similar or different to attitudes, and what is the role that values play in the organizational setup as far as the performance of the employees and the organization is concerned. So, we will first start with emotional intelligence. So, emotions, as we have already shown, emotions are intense feelings towards someone or something. It is not a trait. It is an assortment of non-cognitive skills, capabilities and competencies that influence a person's ability to succeed in coping with environmental demands and pressures. Emotional intelligence is defined as a combination of skills and abilities such as self-awareness, self-control, empathy and sensitivity to the feelings of others. So, emotional intelligence, if you see, it's telling like it's an assortment of non-cognitive skills, capabilities and competencies. So, it is more in the affective domain, how you are feeling towards others, how you are feeling, what is your feeling, what is your idea about your own self, then how you are getting aware of your needs and aspirations of your own self, or how can you control your own self and your emotions and your needs, and whether you are empathetic to others or not, and whether you are sensitivity to the feeling, you develop a sensitivity to the feelings of others or not. These comes under the domain of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is very important for a person. The different aspects of emotional intelligence and the focus on it is very important to the person from organizational point of view, because a person who is having a good emotional intelligence is more desirable as a co-worker or as a team member, because he or she has a control of oneself, knowledge of oneself, and also knows how to interact with others and be careful about, be empathetic to the feelings of others, and there is a good mutual exchange of feelings, and it develops atmosphere of cooperation, it develops good moral, we feeling among the team members, which lead to better performance. Salovey and Meyer in 1990, they initially defined emotional intelligence as a set of skills hypothesized to contribute to the accurate appraisal and expression of oneself, of expression of emotions in oneself and others, the effective regulation of emotion in oneself and others, and the use of feelings to motivate, plan and achieve in one's life. So, if you see, this definition has 2-3 important pointers. It is emotional intelligence is taken to be a set of skills which is contribute to the accurate appraisal and expression of emotion. So, whether you can know what is your emotion and whether you can express it in your proper way, both for yourself and for others. Next is regulation of emotion. That is, it's not enough to know about the emotions, but situations sometimes demand that we regulate our own emotions. So whether you are able to regulate emotions in yourself and others, and also whether you can use feelings to motivate, plan and achieve in one's life. So whether you can use emotion as a tool, as a feeling, as a tool to motivate, it's a process to motivate, plan and achieve in one's life. So there are three aspects of it. You appraise and know what your emotions are and what the others' emotions are. You can regulate the emotions in your own self and in others, and you can properly use more emotions in your life to motivate yourself and others and achieve what you want and what is good for the others and for the organization. So these three aspects together makes emotional intelligence. So Mayer and others in 1999 view it as a specific set of abilities that include the capacity to understand, reason about and use emotions in thinking and action. So you have to use emotions in your thinking and action also. Goldman in 1995 added, in a sense we have two brains, two minds and two different kinds of intelligence, rational and emotional. How we do in life is determined by both. So it's very important to use both your brains, right brain and left brain, and use emotions in whatever you do, whatever decisions you take in your life, and the way you see the process you take to solve problems. The competencies required are for emotional intelligence required are, first is know yourself, which is called self awareness. Know yourself is again divided into two parts: enhance emotional literacy, that is recognize and appropriately express emotions. So it is very important to know what is the proper expression of a particular emotion. So you have to recognize the emotion and learn the proper appropriate or the proper way of expressing that emotion. So next is recognize patterns, recognize reactions and choices. So you have to know, like, what are the reactions to the emotions, what others are making, what feedback you are getting from your own self, physiological feedback, and then you have to know the different choices for expressing that emotion. So it consists of two parts: you know yourself, that is enhance emotion. First you have to become literate about your emotions, and then you have to recognize the patterns of expressing emotions based on the reactions that you get both from yourself and from others. Choose yourself, that is self management. Apply consequential thinking. So evaluate the costs and benefits of choices before acting. So if you decide to show or express certain emotions and you have 2-3 different choices of how you are going to express your emotions, then you have to evaluate the cost and benefit associated with each of these choices. Navigate emotions, so learn from and transform feelings. So what you can do is, based on the cost and benefit analysis that we have done, then you can navigate your emotions and transform your feelings, like from positive to further positive or negative to less negative emotions, and you can move from higher intensity to lower intensity if it is negative emotions, and from like lesser intensity to more higher intensity in case of positive emotions. So you have to, or you can, if possible, try to shift from negativity to positivity. increase optimism, identify multiple options for changing the future. So, if you are having a particular emotional state, and people generally tell like you are of this nature, and you know also it's you are of certain nature, then what happens, like you have to generate, you have to know like what are the multiple options for changing in the future, like what like if you want to change yourself in the future, this is because it's self management. If you want to change yourself in the future, then what could be the multiple options available? You have to find out the options for changing. Like suppose now generally you go through negative emotions, but you want to change it to positive emotions in your life. You have to like want to nurture positive emotions, positive ways of looking into things. Then how you can do it? Through like small steps taken to look into the positive aspects into the thing. Take pleasure, take joy from very small aspects in life, and from very simple things in life, and try to move in that way, so that generally you can change in future very gradually. Engage intrinsic motivation, build internal energy and drive. So, what you can do is you can become intrinsically motivated, understand the joy of doing certain things, from derive the joy from the job itself that you are doing, the work itself you are doing, and gets give yourself, which is self direction, increase empathy, respond appropriately to others' feelings. So, you have to be empathetic to others. Try to understand the problem from that person's point of view, why that particular person is thinking or doing in certain things, and without being judgmental about he is good or he is bad, he is right or he is wrong, then try to see the fact from that person's perspective and try to find out ways of helping that person. Pursue noble goals, align daily choices with principles and purposes, like higher values in life. What choices you take, what is the path that you take for reaching certain goals should be always driven by certain principles and purposes that you value in your life, certain values that you nurture for yourself. Emotional intelligence, as defined by Meyer and Soloway, tells about perception, appraisal and expression of emotion, and it is the ability to identify emotion in one's physical and psychological states, identify emotions in other people and objects, express emotions accurately and express needs related to those feelings, discriminate between accurate and inaccurate or honest and dishonest expressions of feelings. So, this is very important. You have to understand what is the accurate expression and the honest expression of feelings, and where there is a camouflaging regarding your facially you are trying to project something, you are trying to appear to be something, but your emotions are different. So, what is the honest and dishonest expression of feelings? We have to be careful about it. Emotional facilitation of thinking, which is the ability to redirect and prioritize one's thinking based on the feelings associated with objects, events and other people. Generate or emulate vivid emotions to facilitate judgments and memories concerning feelings. Capitalize on mood swings to take multiple points of view. Ability to integrate these mood induced perspectives. Use emotional states to facilitate problem solving and creativity. So while we are thinking, while we are rational thinkers, what we generally do, we try to look at objects, we try to look at problems very objectively, and we try to keep our emotions away from it, and then try to find out solutions for the problems. But sometimes these solutions are so like dry, unappealing sort of solutions that people generally do not appreciate it or fail to like identify with the solutions. So what, because people are rational as well as emotional human beings, we just cannot think of a person without his or her emotions. So what we can do, instead of just separating emotions away from the thinking process and problem solving aspect, what we can do is utilize emotions, think from the keeping the emotional lens open, like what will be the solutions, and prioritize the thinking based on the emotions attached with the objects, events and other people. Like what could be the possible emotions associated with different things about which we are to prioritize our choices. And we have to emulate the vivid emotions to facilitate judgments and memories for the feelings. So also we can capitalize on different mood swings which people may have from time to time to understand, to generate multiple points of view about a particular problem, about an issue, about an event, and then we may try to integrate these perspectives to find out ways of answering or viewing that event. And we can use also emotions for problem solving and creativity, that because with these generates the passion in solving the problem. Understanding and analyzing emotional information is employing emotional knowledge, which is the ability to understand how different emotions are related, perceive the causes and consequences of feelings, interpret complex feelings such as emotional blends and contradictory feeling states, understand and predict likely transition between emotions. So it is that ability is the ability to understand how different emotions are related. The highest of the positive emotion can be related to highest of the negative emotion, like we tell, like love is related to hatred. So in the similar way, like when you have very intense love today, the day due to certain factor that love is not there, that emotion will switch on, will become a most intense hatred that the people share about each other. could be. So, these opposites are there, and perceive the causes and consequences of feeling, like what has led to this feeling and what could be the consequences of a particular feeling that people are having. What is the, if the feeling is very complex in nature, what are the blends of emotion, like sometimes people are feeling in certain way, but they are not able to identify the emotions that are leading to that particular feeling, and it is a blend of emotions, and we should be having the ability, the more ability we have to identify the emotions which are blending with each other, and also sometimes leading to contradictory feeling states, it is better that we can process the information from these emotional states and understand and the likely transition between emotions, where, what are the factors that triggers like a transformation of a positive emotion to a negative one, or vice versa, negative emotion to a positive one is very important to be known, so that we can take important measures for maybe controlling or nurturing these factors when as the situations may be, like when there is a transition between different emotions, and we can, if we can predict also, then we can understand when this transition is going to happen and how, and we can take like corrective measures, or if it is like we find like the positive is transforming to a negative emotion, or we can take on the nurturing factors also if you find like the negative is generally transforming to a positive one. So, as the situations demands, we can modify ourselves to like to analyze the emotional information, and so with this emotional knowledge it leads to better adjustment of the employee within the organization and better like interpersonal interactions also. Regulation of emotion is the ability to be open to feelings, both those that are pleasant and those that are unpleasant, monitor and reflect on emotions, engage, prolong or detach from an emotional state depending upon its judged informativeness or utility, manage emotion in oneself or others. So, regulation of emotion is, so we should be open to feelings both positive and negative, and so that it's very important. It's a learning situation. We can learn from unpleasant emotions also, because that develops our capability to know how to deal with unpleasant situations. It increases our competency to deal with unpleasant situations, know why situations went unpleasant and what can be done to transform it to a pleasant situation. So, being open to feelings both pleasant and unpleasant are very essential in a person's life. Monitor and reflect on emotion. You have to monitor and reflect on like wow, when are the emotions changing, what are the components of a particular emotion, what different expressions that we are giving to a particular emotion, and so on and so forth. So, again we have to understand based on the utility of the emotions and informativeness of the emotion, like when should we start detaching ourselves from a particular emotional state, or we have to engage and prolong the particular emotional state based on its utility. So, like This is particularly relevant when we are talking of counseling sessions. Sometimes what happen, like while counseling, the counselor becomes emotionally also tries empathetic to the counselee's problems, and at sometimes at a certain point of time, these he or she becomes so involved in the whole process that this role playing starts as if she or he takes up the role of the employee and starts to experience those emotions also, which may be to certain extent may lead to emotional labor on the part of the counselor, because at the he or she is facing different emotions. One is his or her own set of emotions, and also experiencing the emotions of the counselee. So in these cases, it's very important also to practice detachment, like as long as you are discussing the case, like you are empathetic, you remember, you try to understand from the employee's perspective, from the counselee's perspective, but once the session is over, we have to detach from that particular emotional state or that particular counselee session, so that we do not move forward with the emotions that generated during the counseling session. So that is very important. To practice of detachment also is very important. We have to manage emotions in oneself or in others. So managing one's own emotions and the emotions of others also is very important as far as regulation of emotion is concerned, because it is not possible that in all situations we can express the emotions to the highest degree or intensity. So what we have to control is the intensity of a particular emotion that we express in certain situations. So based on this, like we have talked of emotions, then what is the emotion or the attitude per se that employees have towards the organization, and the organization also has a reciprocal emotion or attitude, then what is the consequence? Is we find like employees' attitude to the organization is positive, organization's attitude towards the employee is also positive, the employee will stay in the organization. Employees' emotions or attitudes about the organization is positive, but the organization is having a negative feeling about the employee, then the consequence is employee is terminated. Employee is having a negative feeling, but the organization is having a positive feeling. What happens is employee leaves voluntarily. Both of the employees and the organization are sharing a negative feeling about each other, then what happens? The employee leaves by mutual agreement. So these are the four consequences that may happen when there is a match or mismatch between the feelings that the employee is having towards the organization and the organization's feeling towards the employees. When we were discussing in the past slides, last slide about detachment, so what is more like the work attitudes which is relevant in Indian context, that is the karma yoga is one of the principal concepts which deals with how to work without without any attachment to the outcomes that you desire. So, karma yoga means a tendency to discharge one's duties without lasting after the outcomes. It has the following dimensions: a sense of duty or obligation towards others arising out of one's feeling of one being connected to one's surroundings, coupled with striving to live a life for the benefit of the society. Spontaneous action leading to absence of craving for material gratification. Equanimity between contrasting factors that represent appropriate balance without disregarding what is necessary, without any overemphasis on anything. So, in a short, it's like you work because for the pleasure of working, because you see yourself connected to the environment, you see yourself connected to the cosmos, though there are initial differences present superficially, but you understand like all things are connected to each other because you realize that eternal connectivity of the different aspects in life. So, what you do, you take up a spontaneous action. You can define like these are the factors which may lead to employee engagement as we are discussing now. It is a discretionary voluntary action, the passionate work that you undertake for the joy of working itself without being much more concerned about the outcomes that you get out of that working. So, when the process is right, definitely it will follow like you get a better outcome, but while as a performer you are more satisfied, you are more enjoy, what you enjoy is working it as a process itself, and you do not crave for any material gain. It's more of intrinsic motivation that is working, and so, and you find notice the equality between contrasting factors. Also, you try to find out the commonness between even contrasting things, and you see everything in a very holistic concept. Is connectivity between every elements present around you, and you take a joy in working for others and for it's an obligation that you find, that obligation that arises out of your feelings of being connected to your own surroundings. So, this is a beautiful concept which tells about like voluntary action and getting you becoming intrinsically motivated and finding out joy from that action. When we are talking of changing employee attitudes, we talk of making reward system closely tied to individual team or individual or team performance, setting challenging goals with employees so that those with achievement drives can experience the opportunity for satisfaction through their accomplishment. So, you have to sit along with the employees and have to decide along with them what could be the challenging goals and what they want to experience, and give them the opportunity for setting their own goals, and that is they will derive more joy while they set their own goals and they can accomplish those targets. So, defining clear role expectations so that employees struggling with ambiguity can overcome that concern. So, if you see like some people are not able to understand what is the expectation from them, from the organization, it's better to set clear expectations about their roles, what they are expected to achieve, and that may help in changing their attitudes from a very confused state, and they can overcome that struggle from that confused state, and they may become positively they become comfortable because ambiguity is no longer there, and they can know what they have to do to meet the organization's expectations. Refraining from attacking the employee's attitude, so we should refrain from attacking the attitudes of the employees. Instead, we should use active listening skills so that we know exactly what the attitudes and the emotions, what the employee is trying to tell, and how, what are the cues which can be used for changing the attitudes of these employees. Providing frequent feedback to satisfy the need for information about performance levels, exhibiting a caring, considerate orientation by showing concern for employees' feelings, providing opportunities for employees to participate in decision making, showing appreciation for appropriate effort and citizenship behavior. These concern about the employees, the concern of the employee of the organization towards the employees' feelings, recognizing them, empowering them to participate in decision making, all these providing frequent feedback about their performance, all these creates a positive feeling, and which facilitates the changing of attitudes of the employees by the organization. So, if this positive atmosphere is there, positive efforts are taken by the organization, then the ground is prepared, basic ground is prepared, which and through which there can be a smooth transition of the employee's attitude, maybe from negative to positive, or positive to a higher positive, or from more negative to a less negative. So, some small gestures on part of the management, some employers, part of the organization, helps a lot in preparing the ground for changing employee attitudes. Values, some facts are like values are characteristic of an object. It is attribute possessed by an individual and thought desirable. Values provide standard of competence and morality. Values are fewer in number than attitudes. Values sometimes transcend specific object, situation or person, relatively permanent and resistant to change, central to the core of a person. So, values is characteristic of an object, means we always have values about certain permanent beliefs, high level thoughts about certain objects, and so it is we always have a value about certain object or certain ways of looking into things, and these are thought to be desirable, something which is given thought to be worthy, something which is thought to be desirable is taken as a value. Values provide standard of competence and morality. So, it is one of the standards, like if you like honesty, like friendliness, all these are taken to be values which are taken to be standards of competence and morality. So, values are lesser in number than attitudes, because it is a like it's a principle that you share in your life, that you have in your life. So, sometimes values are very universal in nature and it transcends specific object, situation or person, and these are relatively permanent and resistant to change, because values take time to develop. So, you go through number of phases of check and recheck and acceptance and rejection and all these things. Some values you learn from your parents, your families, some you develop in the ways of your as you progress in your life, because it takes time to develop, or it has been tested through generations and has been transmitted to the new generation, then through the cultures, then it's relatively permanent and it is resistant to change. And it's very central to the core of a person, because you sometimes get these learnings from your families and it's been transmitted to you through through the family. Similarities of values and attitudes are both influence cognitive processes and behavior. Both are learned and are acquired from the same source. They are enduring in nature and resistant to change. They have reciprocal influences on each other. Differences of values and attitudes are: values represent judgment of what ought to be, like what ought to be done in a particular situation. Attitude is a predisposition to act in certain way based on those values. Values represent a single belief that guides actions and judgments across objects and situations. Attitude represents several beliefs focused on a specific object or situation. So, values represent a single belief, like it is good to be honest, you do not tell a lie sort of thing, and that guides actions and judgments across objects and situations. Attitudes represent several beliefs focused on specific objects or situations. So, on a particular object you may have a positive feeling because you believe that different aspects of the objects are attractive to you due to certain factors. So, it can be related to several beliefs, and values are derived generally from social and cultural mores, and attitudes are your personal first hand experience with the objects and how it gained through direct experience mainly, and so as a result you develop a particular attitude. Values have been variously defined by different people, like if you see Lec-10 defined values in 1950 as the affective, cognitive and conative elements as essential to the concept of value. Rockier defined it as a mode of conduct or an end state of existence which is personally or socially preferable to an opposite or converse mode of conduct or end state of existence. Chakraborty in 1987 defined values in which an individual tends to make judgment or choices both about goals and means at different stages of one's life in different facets of it, which leads to happiness of self and society. So, values again can be of various types, like societal values, cross cultural values, organizational values, personal values, work values. So, values that we attach to different aspects of life. So, the Lec-10 framework is the values, the relationship with the environment, time, orientation. We have values regarding nature of people, activity, focus on responsibility, concept of space. Chakraborty in 1991 tells about the respect for individuals, cooperation and trust, purification of mind, top quality products and services, workers worship. So, they will find a list of values like given by Prakash also in Indian context. Sinha and Sinha in 1974 told about the socio-cultural values in the Indian context, like lack of commitment, lack of team orientation, preference for personalized relationship, dependence, proneness, aram, showing off and so we have to find out like whether like this work done in 1974 and you may try to find out what is the still the socio-cultural values nurtured in the present context in the Indian situations. Some of these values may still be prevailing and some of the values may have occurred a change, even if a slow change if possible, based on the situations that we are now changed. Because more interactions is happening, mode of communications are further available, we are interacting with the whole world, and so is there any change or still we are continuing with the values as mentioned over here. A study, a probe can be done in that regard. Cross-cultural values like Schwartz's value system are like openness to change, conservation, self and enhancement, self transcendence. These are some of the cross-cultural values, and you find like openness to change is self-direction, stimulation, conservation is conformity, security, tradition, self-enhancement is achievement and power, self-transcendence is benevolence, universalism. So, these are the value systems nurtured by Schwartz. While in Hofstede's classification, as we discussed in earlier classes also, it talks of individualism, collectivism, power, distance, uncertainty, avoidance, and achievement versus nurturing orientation, long term versus short term orientation. And we can classify different nations based on this, whether they are individual and collective oriented, whether what is the power distance, whether they tolerate uncertainty or avoid uncertainty, whether they are achievement oriented or not, whether they are short term or long term orientation or not. So, organizational values are again values nurtured by the company's actions and practices, and we have different researchers giving different values like Woodcock and Dave give power and reward, effectiveness, fairness, teamwork, law and order, defense. And then Peters and Waterman, they also give a set of organizational values like superior quality and service, importance of people as individuals, importance of details in execution, importance of profit orientation, all these things are there. And Suar and Contia in 2005, they have listed like organizational leadership, organizational growth, profit maximization, product quality and customer service, quality of personnel, cost consideration, obedience to organizational rules, physical work conditions, protection of the surrounding environment. These are values listed by different researchers and which may vary from organization to organizational rewards for employees, worthy contribution, innovation, honesty, sincerity, transparency. You find a whole list of values. This was a part of my research work, like what we did as a part of my PhD thesis, and here we found values like work as worship, social welfare, equality, openness and honesty are the values which are more important for in the organizational context, which was the rural banks that I worked with. So, the whole list of values which have been listed by different researchers, it is not that you will find that one single organization is practicing or it's encouraging all these values, but it depends on the nature of the organization about like what they are doing and its purposes and goals. Personal value system is the goals of the employees of each person, and you find a list of terminal values which are 18 in nature, and instrumental values. These values are what helps to achieve the terminal values. These are also 18. So, total of 18 plus 18, 36 values which Rakia has listed under the personal value system. And Super gave 45 items to list like 15 work values which are very specific to the work, that what people try to derive from the work. So, when like there is a match between the organizational values, the work values, the personal values and also the societal values, nurture all these values, then what happens, there is a balance between, there is an alignment between all these values, and it may lead to better individual and organizational performance. But when the employees values is not matching with the organization values, or as such the organization values is not matching with the national values, then some conflicts may arise, and it requires for accommodation and adjustment either on the part of the employee or on the part of the organization, so that the values can get assimilated with each other. When that is done, then it leads to proper a very holistic situation where everybody feels like their values are respected, taken care of, and they enjoy that working atmosphere, and they love to perform in the organization, and organization also performs better in that type of national or societal system of which it is a part. With that we will come to the questions like what is attitude, how it is related to cognition, affect and behavior, what is cognitive dissonance, discuss with example cognitive dissonance as an attitude change technique, what are the major job attitudes, discuss with example how attitude is related to job satisfaction. Think of an important attitude you have regarding a career. Identify 3 components of that attitude and indicate what each outcome response would be. What is emotional intelligence? What is the relevance of emotional intelligence in organizational behavior? What are personal values and organizational values? Discuss with importance the values in workplace. So, with this we come to the end of this session, and hopefully if you find answers to these questions, it will give you a very broad idea about the attitudes, the values, the connectivity of attitudes and values, and how it is related with the performance of the individual and the organization. Thank you.